Okay, everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining me tonight. Be'ezrat Hashem. Tonight we're going to be learning Parashat Vayigash, which is Be'ezrat Hashem, this week's parasha, learning for the complete and speedy recovery of all those that were wounded in the terror attacks and all those that are taken captive. Hashem should bring them home safely. Be'ezrat Hashem, and we should hear only good news for all of Klal Yisrael. This week's parasha.
Amen.
We have a very, very interesting discussion here about the story of.
What's the password of the Zoom?
Ethan, we'll talk later. Okay, Tzaddik? Can't talk right now. I can't talk right now. Okay, so it's okay. So we have the very amazing discussion of Yosef revealing himself to his brothers, and there's a lot that begins over here in the parasha. Let's start from the beginning. Vayigash elav Yehuda vayomer bi Adoni edaber na avdecha davar beoznei Adoni ve'al yifar apcha be'avdecha ki chamocha keParo. So Yehuda is now in a position where he has no choice but to try and to save Binyamin that was taken, is going to be taken by Yosef as a slave, and he says, "Bi Adoni edaber na avdecha davar beoznei Adoni." Says, please, my master, may your slave or your servant speak words in the ears of my master, and don't get mad at your servant, meaning that seemingly it's talking about himself. Because you are like Paro. Ben Ish Chai has a very interesting take on this pasuk, a new approach, which I found very interesting. So he says that Yehuda over here is actually proving to Yosef that Yosef is a fake. And it's very interesting how he does it. He is reminding Yosef that, Yosef, you have been trying all along to play it as if you are somebody that is involved in all kinds of sorcery and magic and things like that. And when we left your house, and it was all amazing, and we were on such a high after we left with everything good. So you sent your servant after us. You sent your servant after us, and he said, why are you repaying goodness with evil? I helped you, I took care of you, and now you go and you do something like this. You steal the goblet of my master. Don't you know my master is someone? You said to us, don't you know that I see things, I do things, and I would know that one of you stole it, right? Why would you do that? What kind of silly thing it is that you did, right? So over here, very interestingly, Yehuda comes to Yosef and says, your servant that you sent after us, he didn't just tell Binyamin, open up your bag because my master said that it's in your bag. That's not what happened. He made us, each one of us, open up every single bag that we had. Every one of us had to open up our bag. So says Yehuda, if you're such a future seer, you know what's happening, you're aware of things that are going on, and that's the reason that you sent your slave after us. Why did you make us all open up each one? Why did we all have to open up our bags? Why is it that you couldn't have told your servant to tell Binyamin to open up his bag because he's the one who has it? Why is that the case, right? So says the Ben Ish Chai, Yehuda is telling Yosef, you ki chamocha keParo. You are like Paro, you're a fraud. You see, you have a problem, Yosef. Your problem is that just exactly what you told Paro, which is Paro said that I am what causes the Nile River to flow. I decide when the Nile River will rise or when it will not rise. I decide everything, right? Paro was trying to play it as if he's a god, as if he's in charge. And that's the reason why when he had his dreams, Yehuda is telling Yosef, the reason that when he had his dreams, nobody could come to him and could give him a true interpretation of his dreams because they were terrified. If they would give him the correct interpretation, which is that there are going to be 7 good years, there are going to be 7 bad years, and it's totally out of his control, and he's not a god, and he's not nothing, so then you know what's going to happen? He's going to say off with their heads, because the true interpretation would actually prove that he is a fraud, right? Until you came. See, I researched you, says Yehuda. I know how you came into power. You're the guy that came and told Paro that he had a dream which meant X, Y, and Z. And that's how you became a powerful person. So you actually told Paro to his face that his claim all along that he is somebody who decides the Nile River and all of that stuff, that's all phony baloney. And really there's a God, and the God takes care of everything, and you proved him to be a fraud. Well, guess what, Mr. Second to the King? The very same thing is happening to you. Because if you were actually somebody who knows things and is aware of what's going on, so then why is it that your slave told us, each one of us, to open up our backpacks and pull out the stuff inside? Why couldn't you have just told them to go straight to the youngest one, to Binyamin? You know why? Because you don't know nothing. That was his message to him. So now, look at how the Ben Ish Chai reads it into the words. He says, "Idaberna avdecha davar beoznei Adoni." So always, with the way that we learn this, Rashi, simple pshat is that Yehuda is saying about himself, I am your servant. He's being very humble. I'm your slave, right? Because he wants to say, take me instead of Binyamin. So he's talking about himself. Says the Ben Ish Chai, according to this pshat, go talk to the guy that you sent to us. Go talk to him. Go ask him how he asked us to take out every last thing from our bags. We started off with the biggest one, the oldest one, then he went to the youngest one. Why did he make us do that? If he knows what's going on, if you know what's going on, why did you make us go through all of that? There's something fishy over here, right? So therefore, you're a fraud. That's what he's saying to him. And then he says that when your slave tells you about what he did, don't get mad at him. Don't be upset at him. Why? Because the truth is, you're exactly the same fraud as he was. You're a liar. I see right through this. I don't believe you for a second. Very interesting take from the Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai goes on. He has a beautiful question, famous question. Ben Ish Chai says, there's a very basic question that everybody always asks. Why is it that when Yosef became second to the king, why didn't he send a letter to Yaakov, to his father, saying, Abba, I'm alive and well, everything is good, and I can bring you here and I can take care of you? Why didn't he just send him that message? Why did he wait for all of this to happen? And what's going on? That's number one. And of course, the other famous question, why is it that Yosef put his brothers through so much pain and suffering when they had to come and he had to take Shimon, and he said that they're spies, and then they had to go back, and they had to go through all of this stuff. And then he frames Binyamin as a thief, and he says, yeah, you stole. And now they take Binyamin, put him in jail. Why did he do all of this? So the Ben Ish Chai actually says, the Meshech Chochmah, Simcha Dvizk says the fact that Yosef didn't send some kind of letter after all these years, the brothers took it as a sign that he was actually dead. Because if he was still alive, he would have been able to somehow reach Yaakov. And that never ended up happening. So it must be that he's dead. And that's why they said, Hayachad met, one of our brothers is dead. That's what they said to Yosef. They didn't know it was him. They actually thought he was dead. So why didn't he send that letter? So the Ben Ish Chai explains beautifully. Yosef HaTzadik has one thing in mind. He wants tikkun for their neshamot. He wants their neshamot to right what was wrong. You see, when you do a great sin like kidnapping somebody and selling him as a slave, which is punishable by death, when you do something like that, so then there's a big problem. The neshama of the person is damaged. And the only way to fix it is by going ahead and doing some kind of a tikkun. Now, the Rambam explains that the way to do a tikkun is when the highest level of a tikkun is when a person is faced with the very same challenge that he failed with in the past. and he now is presented with it again, and because of his teshuvah that he did, and he sincerely repented to Hashem, so because of that, he is not willing to go through with the sin that he wants to do again. So in other words, if let's say, the Rambam gives an example, let's say that he had some forbidden relations with a woman. So now he did something that was asur, and he has a lust for it, a desire for it, but now he's in the same, he finds himself very stressed out about it. He did a grave avera. He does teshuvah, he repents to Hashem, he says, Hashem, I'm never doing it again, etc. And lo and behold, he finds himself a few months later down the road in the same spot, with the same temptation, the same woman, and everything is in position, set up just perfectly, so that he could do the avera just like he did last time. And because of no other reason other than his teshuvah to Hashem, he decides not to do it because he feels that that is wrong, because Hashem is watching him and Hashem wants him to do what's right. So that's the highest level tikkun. So says the Ben Ish Chai, Yosef wanted to give them the opportunity to have the highest level tikkun. And he says the first thing is that the Ben Ish Chai says they caused their father so much pain by bringing him the bad news about Yosef. They came, they gave him the coat, they dipped it in blood, and they said, do you know whose coat this is? Identify this coat. And they gave him the news basically that Yosef was eaten up by an animal. That's what it sounds like. So there was so much pain given to their father by the bad news that they gave. Yosef said the only way to fix that is by the brothers giving good news. That's the only way we could do this. The only way to give the tikkun for the neshama is to go back to the very same person, Yaakov Avinu. They caused them so much pain, and that they should be the ones to go back to him and give him the good news and cause him so much happiness. So can you imagine? Think about this. How much would somebody want to reach out to his father after so long and finally go ahead and say, Abba, look, this is what happened, and I could reunite with you and I could come back to you. No, says the Ben Ish Chai, he's waiting for the opportunity because he's thinking about his brothers, about their tikkun, that the only way for them to be able to fix their neshamot and the damage that they did is by them being the people to go and to spread the good news that Yosef is alive. So that's why he waited with that. Very interesting, Ben Ish Chai. Then he says, the next point, which is that Binyamin is very much like Yosef. Binyamin is the son of Rachel. Binyamin is the one that Yaakov is obviously very much protective over, more so than anybody else. Obviously, he loves his other kids, but Binyamin is Rachel's son. That's the only thing he has left of Rachel. And he's so worried and he's so anxious and he's nervous and he wants to make sure that nothing happens to Binyamin. And now the brothers are in a position to do away with him too, because Binyamin is that beloved son that Yaakov loves more than anybody else right now. In other words, it's exactly the same case as what happened with Yosef. Almost. Binyamin didn't give bad reports, but the point is that it's very similar. The jealousy, the room for jealousy is there. And now he takes Binyamin away from them. So he has the chance, says the Ben Ish Chai, all the brothers have the chance now to do away with Binyamin and to say, okay, good riddance. We don't have to worry about any of Rachel's kids anymore. And that's going to be the end of it. Now Yaakov will focus only on us. But instead, because of what Yosef did, now the brothers have the chance to do the ultimate tikkun. Because again, it's like the same place and the same woman that the Rambam talked about. It's exactly identical. You have the same exact opportunity to do the bad thing again. And instead, you now not only don't do the wrong thing, but you go above and beyond. You do the utmost that you can to protect and to do the right thing. So this explains the Ben Ish Chai is how Yosef set them up to be able to do a tikkun for their neshamot. Because by doing it this way, they were able to demonstrate that they understood that there was a big mistake that happened before, and they weren't going to allow that to be repeated again. And that's how he allowed them to fix it, by being limsor nefesh, to really do above and beyond, to go and to actually be willing to die for the sake of saving Binyamin. And that Yosef felt was the proper way to do the tikkun, and that's why he set it up in that way. So in other words, his intentions were not motivated by hatred, they were not motivated by cruelty or punishment for what they did, but rather he wanted to help them to do a tikkun. And that's how he helped them to do that, by putting them up in a similar situation as what happened with himself, and by having them fix it by being willing to be mosrim nefesh, to really give up their entire lives just to bring Binyamin back to their father. Now, very interesting. It says at this point, V'lo yachol Yosef litapek. Yehuda gives him this whole speech, and Yosef can no longer hold himself back. He has to now go ahead and reveal, but it says something else. L'chol hanitzavim alav. To all those who are standing there by him. What does it mean? V'lo yachol Yosef litapek l'chol hanitzavim alav. Yosef could not hold himself in to all those who are standing by him. So I saw a beautiful shot again. I believe this was from the Meshech Chochmah. He says that Yosef wanted litapek. Yosef wanted to hold himself back and not reveal himself, because the truth is that the dreams were not yet fulfilled. In his dream, he saw the shemesh and the yareach as well. He saw the sun and the moon. So maybe the moon can't be there because his mother passed away, but the son, Yaakov Avinu, technically in the dream also bowed down to him. So his dream wasn't totally fulfilled yet. So at this point, Yosef wants to hold it off still, and says the Meshech Chochmah, for another reason he wants to hold it off as well, because he says you should know that they are begging, they are pleading, they are doing all of this, right? All of this work to try and save Binyamin, and Yosef wants to hold himself back from listening to them, because when he begged and when he pleaded and when he cried out to them not to do anything, did they listen to him? No. So Yosef does, in a sense, want to be able to drag it out a little bit further, but says the pasuk, "V'lo yachol Yosef litapek." He can't. Why? Because lechol hanitzavim alav. Because there are lots of other people present. As you know, Yosef is second to the king, and at this point, there are lots of people, guards and other ministers, etc., that are around, and they're observing what's happening over here, and they see that there might be some merit to what the brothers are saying, and Yosef is going to completely ignore every word that they're saying and just continue to be harsh and cruel. That would make Yosef look cruel and nasty, and he didn't want that. So therefore, at this point, due to the fact that there were others surrounding him, so he couldn't continue in this way of behaving with the brothers. So therefore, he tells everyone, leave. Now it's time that he has to reveal himself, and therefore he has to go through it this way. As you know, there are many other pshatim. In different years, we've said different explanations. This is a new explanation, that the chol hanitzavim alav is that people shouldn't look at Yosef as cruel and nasty. And they don't know the whole story. They don't know the background of why he's doing this to them. So to them, it makes Yosef look awful. So therefore, Yosef, because of all chol hanitzavim alav, all the people that were standing by, he couldn't continue with what he was doing, and he had to break the news to his brothers. Now, we've reached the point where Yosef says the famous words to his brothers, Ani Yosef, Ha'od Avichai. I am Yosef. Is my father still alive? And so much is said about this, but in a nutshell, we're going to call this section Tochachat Yosef, the rebuke of Yosef, because that's how Chazal explained what's going on here. This is called a tremendous rebuke to the brothers. Now, if you look on the superficial level, Ani Yosef Ha'od Avichai, you don't really see much rebuke over here. You don't, Chazal say it's a tremendous rebuke, and they say that if the brothers were, it says they were so astonished, Nivhalu mipanav, they were so scared, when they from him that that it says if we can't stand to the rebuke of basar v'adam, of people, how much more so to the rebuke of Hashem after 120? We have to stand in front of Hashem, give an accounting for everything, and we won't have any answer. So you see, there's tremendous rebuke from people. How much more so from Hashem after 120? The question that you have to ask here is, what's the big rebuke? Where is the great tochecha that Yosef is giving them? So let's break it down into two parts. Ani Yosef. The first thing that Yosef says is, I am Yosef. Believe it or not, those two words are the biggest, they're part of the biggest tochecha that could be. And the reason for that is as follows. Ani Yosef is another way of saying, look at me now. Look at who I am. I am second to the king, and not only am I second to the king, but I am here in a position where the entire world is relying on me to sustain them. There's famine everywhere. Nobody has any food. And by the way, you should know that whenever you hear somebody with a name, Hatzadik, the usual explanation for why they call that person Hatzadik is because he is charged with the obligation to sustain other people. For example, in the Gemara in Masechet Bava Batra talks about a fellow called Binyamin Hatzadik. Binyamin Hatzadik was a righteous man. Why? Because he was in charge of the community chest, of the community tzedakah, and when people needed money, he would give it to them. So he was called Binyamin Hatzadik. That's why he was given that title. Yosef was called Yosef Hatzadik because he was the one that was on overseeing basically the sustenance of the entire world, because everybody came to Egypt for food. Nobody else had it anywhere else. So that's why he got the title Yosef Hatzadik, for other reasons as well, but that's one of the main reasons. Now, Yosef is saying to them, look at me. Hashem made me his agent, his messenger, to be in charge of giving food to the whole world. Now it also says, Ki nivhalu mipanav. Nivhalu mipanav means they were afraid of panav. Panav means his face, which means that the great Chachamim till this day, and definitely the Shvatim, the tribes of Am Yisrael, the heads of the tribes, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, etc., they were of the capability, they had the skill to be able to look at a person on his face and to see his averot, what he has done wrong, and to see his mitzvot, and to see everything basically by looking at the person's face. It's called chokhmata paratzuf. By looking at somebody's face to have the understanding of what's on this guy, what has this guy done? What has he accomplished? And God forbid the opposite. They were terrified. They see in front of them a man that in the midst of what the Torah calls ervat haaretz, the most impure land on the planet, with so much immorality. Look at what happened to Yosef. Look at the temptation he went through with the wife of Potiphar. Look at all of that. That they see in front of them a man that's an ish kadosh v'tahor. He is holy and pure. So here, after so many years away from his father, he still remained so holy and pure and faithful to the teachings of his father. It's unbelievable. He was raised above Egypt. Hashem revealed to him dreams when he was a teenager, that eventually we saw exactly they came true. Yosef is telling them, guys, look, everything that I told you would happen exactly the way I said it. That's exactly what happened. And that was my level when I was 17. Imagine 22 years later. Look at what's going on, right? He says, you see, all my dreams came true. It's an amazing thing. So they look at that. He says, Ani Yosef. This is who I was back then, and I'm the same exact person, if not on a much higher level right now. And they're saying to themselves, wow, we got it all wrong. We were so wrong about this person. We thought he was a rodef. We thought he was trying to hurt us. We thought he was trying to do bad to us. We thought he had malicious intentions. We thought we were supposed to kill him, and we were dead wrong. It's an amazing thing. That's the greatest tochecha that you could ever have, that you realize that for so long you were under the wrong impression. Everything that you thought was totally off. It's terribly embarrassing. That's a very important lesson for us, because the first part of this tochecha is to understand that the brothers judged Yosef. They looked at him and they said, this guy is trouble. And they made conclusions based on that. And that's wrong. That's very wrong. And they understood that at that point. When he says, Ani Yosef, you guys had it wrong the whole time. Never did I mean harm to you. Never did I want to do bad to you. Yes, I maybe have made a couple of mistakes, but nothing worthy of the pain and suffering that you put me through. It was terrible what they did. And unwarranted. And at this point, it all clicks in their mind. Wow, he says, Ani Yosef, this is who I am. And you guys did that to me. Look at what Hashem thinks of me, and look at what you thought of me. How off you were. That's a terrible rebuke. Rabotai, we too are very guilty of this. A lot of times we miscalculate people's greatness. We think that we're so much better than them. We look down at them. We might even disrespect them. But we have no idea how precious their deeds are in the eyes of Hashem. Like the Gemara in Masechet Baba Batra tells us, Daf Yud Bet, when Yosef, the son of the great, I think it was Rabbi Yeshua, had been knocked out unconscious for a little bit. When he woke up, his father asked him, what did you see when you were unconscious? And he said, Olam hafuch reiti, I saw a world upside down. I saw Elyonim lemata, I saw those that in our world are considered to be Elyonim, upper level people, meaning high class people that are supposedly on the most respected people. I saw them on the bottom in Olam Haba. V'tachtonim, and the people that were on the bottom, I saw them lemala, I saw them up on top. Many times we think that certain people are all that, and we have no idea that it's far from it. And many times there are people that we don't think much of, and all of a sudden you find out that they're all that. We have no idea. Like the story with Eliyahu Navi and Rabbi Barona in the shuk, in the marketplace, and the rabbi asked Eliyahu Navi, do you know anybody in this marketplace that's going to make it to the world to come? Masechet Ta'anit. And Eliyahu Navi said, there's nobody here. And then all of a sudden somebody walked in. There were two different people that walked in, two different groups of people. And Eliyahu Navi said, that guy, he's going to go to Olam Haba. And the rabbi ran over to him and he asked him, what do you do that's so special? And he tried to dig out information from him. What do you do that's so special that you're going to go to the world to come? And the fellow said to him, well, I watch over the jail, and in the jail, I make sure that the men and the women are separated from each other, and I put my bed in between them so that nothing happens, and I try to find out information if they're ever trying to plan a plot against Jewish girls. I go and I find out about it, and I tip off the Jewish girls ahead of time. And the guy wasn't wearing a kippah, and he wasn't wearing tzitzit, and he didn't look like a Jew even. But says Hashem, that guy who's doing so much for Am Yisrael, that guy is going to Olam Haba. Another couple of people were standing there. Eliyahu said, those guys are going to Olam Haba. So this rabbi ran to them and said, what do you guys do? And they said, we are jesters. We joke around with people. We make people feel good. We laugh with them. Somebody's down, we cheer them up. If there's a fight between people, we try to make shalom bayit between them. We kid around with them. We bring laughter to people. And Eliyahu said, that's Olam Haba. These people get Olam Haba. Why? Because in Hashem's eyes, these deeds are very great. Now we would look at them and say, what's so special? I mean, they're doing nice things, but that's Olam Haba. Show me a guy who, finished Shas. That's Olam Haba. These are the things you would think, right? And Eliyahu Navi is saying, there are different ways to Olam Haba. There are different ways. So God forbid for us to miscalculate people's deeds and to say, oh, he's not as important, I'm much better than him, etc., etc. And we can go on and on about that. Many times people don't think much. If I remember, I told you guys once the story of Rabbi Yeshua and the butcher, that this great rabbi was shown his place in Olam Haba, and they showed him that he's right next to the butcher in Olam Haba. And he said, I'm right next to the butcher. This rabbi was the Gedol Ador. His entire life was devoted to learning Torah, teaching Torah, helping people. And they showed him that his spot in the world to come is next to the butcher. He said, what in the world? What did I do to deserve this? I'm next to the butcher. And he had to find out who this guy was. So he went and he found out the location of this butcher. And the butcher heard that this great rabbi has come to see him. He said, well, you guys are laughing at me, you're joking at me. What are you talking about? He says, no, he's outside. He wants to see you. He goes outside. He says, Rabbi, what can I do? What do I owe this honor? And the rabbi said, you have to tell me right now, what is so special about you? He says, what do you mean? I'm just a regular butcher. He says, no, tell me. I need to know. He says, what are you talking about? I'm just a regular guy. He says, no. You need to tell me right now. The rabbi said to him, you have to tell me. He said, look, the only thing I could think of, he says, is I have a very old father. It's not so simple for me to go to him, but I go to him, I bathe him, I take him in, I bring him out, I feed him, and I do whatever I need for him, and I take a lot of time to take care of my father. So Rabbi Yeshua said, in that case, may my portion be with your portion. And he understood that this is a mitzvah that's so precious in the eyes of Hashem, that he's so devoted to taking care of his older father, that he is going to have a portion next to him for all eternity, next to this great tzaddik in Olam Haba. So again, we don't know. We don't know how Hashem calculates things. It depends on the amount of sincerity that goes into the mitzvah. It depends on the amount of purity of thought, of how you intend to serve Hashem by doing the mitzvah. There's so much detail that goes into it. So for me to just dismiss that because I think I'm better, that's the wrong thing. That's what the brothers did. The brothers said, who is this guy? Who is he? He thinks he's better than us. He thinks he's like this. And they had the wrong understanding of him. He comes and he says, Ani Yosef. I am Yosef. You guys had it wrong the whole time. Very important. Then Yosef adds another 3 words, which even in a superficial level don't really make much sense. He says, Aha'od avi chai, is my father still alive? What does that mean, is my father? They just told you your father is alive. Why are you throwing this in right now? So over here, beautifully, the Bet HaLevi says a very nice pshat. He says, Yosef is telling them, a moment ago, Yehuda, you gave me a whole big speech. You told me about how your father loves Binyamin so much. V'nafsho kshura b'nafsho, his soul is tied to his soul. And if I don't bring back Binyamin, how could I ever see my father again? How could I go back without my brother Binyamin? How can I see the pain and suffering that this will bring my father if I go without bringing back Binyamin? It's just not possible to see. You don't understand the level of pain and suffering this will cause my father if I don't bring back Binyamin. I have to bring him back. Says Yosef to Yehuda, Ani Yosef, ha'od avi chai? You know, Yehuda, he's also my father, right? And when you were very keen on selling me as a slave, you don't realize, forget about the pain and the suffering that you caused me to be away from my family for so long when I didn't really do anything to deserve that. I mean, whatever. Forget about that. He says, you didn't stop to think for a minute about the pain and suffering that you're causing our father? I'm surprised he's even still alive. He loved me so much. He cared about me so much. You didn't stop to think for a second about the pain and the suffering you're going to cause my father when he loses me? Ha'od avichai? You didn't think about that when you sold me, did you? He says, think about it. terrible pain. And to a certain extent, you did kill him. Let me ask you something, right? Think of it this way. Has he had any nevuah? Has he had any prophecy the last 22 years? He didn't really say this, but let's pretend that he did. It's all in the same message. Has he had prophecy for the last 22 years? No. You know why? Because the Rambam says if you're sad, you can't be a prophet. 22 years. Yaakov Avinu has a lifetime of prophecy, talking to Hashem, seeing dreams, angels climbing up and down ladders, angels talking to him, meeting up with him. Lifetime of prophecy. 22 years it's gone. Why? Because you killed his spirit. It's as if he's dead. And that's why when they told Yosef that he's alive, what does it say? Vatechi ruach Yaakov Aviem. His soul came back to life. So, ha'od avi chai? Is my father still alive? You didn't realize what pain and suffering you're causing him. Now you gave me a whole speech about Binyamin. Where was that speech when you did that to me? So that indeed is terrible tochecha. Terrible meaning it's so sharp. It's so painful for anybody who hears that. That's something that we have to think about, because we all have a Father in Shamayim. And little do we know that when we make mistakes, when we do something wrong, so our Father in Shamayim also suffers. He doesn't want to see us hurting ourselves. He doesn't want to see us doing things that are bad. Our Father in Shamayim also is suffering, quote unquote, when he sees that we do terrible things, that we make huge mistakes. Right? So this is important for us as well. But that's what he's telling them. He's saying, Ha'od avichai, really? You gave me a whole speech about Binyamin. What about me when you did that to me? Where was that speech then? You didn't think about it back then. So that's very important for us to understand. So at this point, Chazal come and say something very powerful. Chazal come and say the following. This is the Midrash, famous Midrash. Abba Kohen Bardela Amar, Bereshit Rabbah. Abba Kohen Bardela Amar, Oy lanu miyom adin, oy lanu miyom hatochecha. Woe unto us from the day of judgment, woe unto us from the day of rebuke. Yosef ktanam shel shvatim haya. Yosef was the smallest of the tribes. Velo hayu yecholim la'amod betochachto, and they weren't able to withstand his rebuke. Lichshe'avo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when the Holy One, blessed be He, comes, ve'yochiach kol echad ve'echad lefi ma shehu, and He will rebuke each person according to what he is. Alachat kama v'chama, how much more so when Hashem judges us that way. So Rav Pam beautifully says, you see over here something very nice. He says the brothers received this tochecha from Yosef as a group. It's much easier to receive tochecha in a group. In other words, you were not the only one who did it. There were another 10 of you that were all just as guilty, right? So it's a little bit lighter it lightens the blow a little bit. But when Hashem comes to a person after 120 and, so to say, rebukes him for certain things, that rebuke is on him and him alone. It's an individual rebuke. That's what the Midrash is telling us over here. So there are two things. We can't even withstand it from a person that embarrasses us so much, where we realize what mistakes we made and we realize how terrible we acted. Even from a person, it's so shameful and we can barely handle that. And that's even in a group, says Rav Pam. How much more so when it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu coming to us on an individual level and saying to us the rebuke, it's so much more devastating. The Midrash then goes on to say something even further. Very interesting. The Midrash goes on to say, Bil'am chacham shel hagoyim lo yachol la'amod betochachto shel atono. Bil'am, the wisest of the goyim, was unable to withstand the rebuke given to him by his donkey. As you know, Bil'am was riding on his donkey, and the donkey all of a sudden sees the angel standing on the way to try and get him not to go. So he presses against the wall on the side. Bil'am's leg gets cut, and it happens not once, not twice, 3 times. He gets off the donkey and he starts to beat him, and all of a sudden, or hurt rather, and the donkey responds to Bil'am, "What are you doing? Have I ever done this to you? Have I ever made such kind of a move? Have I ever done such a thing to you before?" So Bil'am says, "No." So she says to him, "Hahasken hiskanti la'asot mechako." So Bilam says no. In other words, what is the tochicha? So Rav Pam says beautifully, Bilam, you're supposed to see that this is an out of character type of thing. It's out of the ordinary. You should have had a little bit more depth and insight to see that something here is off. Your donkey has never acted like this to you before. How come all of a sudden it's doing that? There must be a reason for that. So instead of you trying to find the reason, you just decide to whack it and whack it and whack it so that you get it back onto the path. Why don't you stop and think for a second? Maybe there's a reason this is going on. My donkey has never acted like this before. There must be something behind it. But you fail to think. You fail to listen to that. So Bilam wasn't even able to withstand that kind of thing. So Rapam says a person has to take from here a very important lesson. A person has to realize that sometimes if you have a relationship with somebody and all of a sudden that person is not behaving the way that they usually do, they maybe even be a little bit disrespectful, maybe they got into a little fight with you. So, instead of just shaming them, instead of just going and embarrassing them or getting upset and fighting with them, you have to try and figure out, why are they doing this? What is the reason that this is happening? There must be some reason. You have to give the person the benefit of the doubt and try and figure out, maybe there's something going on in his life that is causing him to behave this way. And instead of causing more friction and more fighting, etc., try and ease the tensions and release the stress by figuring out what's going on. Maybe a communication with the person will help. So that's another very important thing. But the key is, Rabotai, the message in all of this is to see beyond what meets the eye, to think and to see maybe there's something more that's happening here than what I'm aware of. And that will cause me to change my impression of that person. Same thing with the brothers and Yosef. They failed to see more depth than what they saw. And that's why they ended up doing what they did. So that is something which we have to learn from here, to understand that we must make sure that the tochecha that Yosef gave them really applies to all of us. Number one, to not just miscalculate, misjudge people, assume that they are, not as good as we are, but opposite, humility, to assume that the opposite, everybody's better than me. I have to look up to whoever I can, to grow from them, to learn from the good things that they have to offer, and not just try and put down, God forbid. But more than that, also to remember, Ha'od Avi Chai, is my father still alive? Meaning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is our father as well. And just like the brothers gave their father so much pain and suffering, God forbid, because of what they did to Yosef, we have to remember that also our Father, who at the end of days will rebuke each and every one of us if we deserve it, there's no question that there's always rebuke, there's always room to improve. We don't want that. We don't want that. We want to be able to stay, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we were faithful servants and not cause him suffering, just like the brothers caused their father suffering. Okay, Chazakim Ruchim, guys, thanks for joining me tonight. We're going to stop over here. And of course, there's always so much more to say, but we're going to call it a night for tonight. Thanks for joining me. We'll meet up again next week. Be'ezrat Hashem.